Okay, here we go with chapter 3. In chapter 3, we're graphing, slope, dealing with lines, equations, things like that. What you have to remember for graphing or equations is you now have two variables. So if I had an equation that said x plus y is 5, well, the very basic of what I'm looking for are a number here plus a number here, which equals 5. And hopefully, when you create a table of values, you could do this without any calculating at all. I know you can. Just choose any two numbers that give me 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. That means x is 2, y is 3. 1 and 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. 0 and 5. 0 plus 5 is 5. I could go on and on and on. The reason why we make a graph is that we show the solutions to this equation, because you can't list them all for any equation because they're infinite. So all we need are 2 points to graph this solution. We can do 3, we can do 4, but theoretically we only need 2 points. So remember that these solutions now become our ordered pair. Okay, so if I want to plot these points, I go over to my coordinate plane and I plot the points. So the first one I'm going to plot is the 2, 3. Remember, each one of these marks, unless otherwise indicated, and most of the times you'll see numbers put somewhere on here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7 this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 7 this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 this way. And then down here is also negative 7. So if I want to plot 2, 3, I go over 2, count up 3, and make a dot. The next one I do is I go 1, 4. So see, that's the point 2, 3. Don't forget that. I go over 1, up 4. Now this third point, if I had $1 for every time a student plotted an intercept backwards, I could retire. Okay, so don't feel bad if you do that. You're not the only one. But it's time to stop doing that. Because remember, this number here is your x. That's the one that tells you to go right or left. The second one is your y. That tells you to go up and down. So therefore, if I have 0, 5, well, I'm always starting here at the middle when I'm plotting points. I don't go anywhere, and then I go up 5, which is right there. That's 0, 5. Okay, and you notice all my solutions are lining up. They have to be, because this graph of this equation we're looking at is a straight line. It has to be a straight line. So you've got to stop plotting those intercepts backwards. I see it all the time. So if we look at just another solution to that equation, I can also do 5, 0, because 5 plus 0 is 5. So every one of these points solve this equation. Okay, that's your x-intercept. So this is your y-intercept because it's on the y-axis. Okay, you've got to get these straight. Okay, you have to. It's time. This here is the x-intercept. Why? Because it lies on the x-axis. And you've got to plot them correctly. You've got to list them correctly. You just got to remember, if it's the y-intercept, your x-coordinate is 0. And I know that probably confuses you, but think about it, has to be on the y-axis, so x has to be 0. The other side of it, the x-intercept, your y-coordinate is 0. So if I plot this one, x is 5, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I don't move up or down. So that is the point 5, 0. And you notice they're all on a nice straight line. So what I see mistakes with students on their tests, on their quizzes, whatever, if I look at things, is you're plotting them backwards. That's one thing. You know, you're plotting them on the wrong axis. Because remember, this is X, this is Y. When you intercept something, that means you cross it or get in front of it, however you want to look at it, but I'm intercepting the Y-axis. I'm intercepting the X-axis. Okay? So, you know, plot those correctly. Don't make that mistake anymore. Now, the other issue are signs. Again, we talked about that in chapter 2 video. You got to get your signs right. But this is the most basic line that I can hopefully maybe help you see what you're doing. Now, the other thing this line has is a slope. So your slope is how we measure how steep something is. Just think about skiing, slopes, hills you drive on. We're lucky in this class, we're only finding slopes of straight lines. Think about how a surveyor has to find the slope of a big mountain. Okay, I mean, it's just way more complicated, but that you have to know how steep something is in order to, you know, if you are building a house, building a roof, you need to know the steepness of your roof. You need to know the slope of a hill. There's, you know, things you need to know. But your slope is just your comparison of your vertical change versus your horizontal change from any one point on the graph to the other. And if you look at this one, it's all the same. Okay, you know, it's all 1-to-1 ratio. So, you know, my slope of this graph, okay, if I start on any one point, to get to this point here, I have to go down 1 and right 1. Well, down 1 and right 1. That's my rise over my run. Rise is not always up. Rise can be down. So down 1 is -1, right 1 is +1. So that gives me an overall slope of -1, which means for every point I go down, I go right 1. My line's going downhill. That also indicates negative slope. You can also look at going slope from this point up to here. So in this case, I would go up 1 and left 1. Well, up 1 is positive. Left 1 is negative. So it still works out to be -1 slope. Okay, however you look at it. So don't overcomplicate this. You're just counting vertical versus horizontal. I mean, I could go all the way from here and go down 5 and right 5, and guess what? That still works out to be -1. But you got to make sure you get, again, your signs. Your signs, your signs, your signs. You got to start paying attention to the signs, okay? It's the only way you're going to be successful in a math class. You got to pay attention to those minute details, because then you're wrong, okay? And if someone who's building a roof screws up, that costs you money, all right? So, you know, just think about that. Pay attention to your details, all right? So the good thing about this one is, well, the numbers are fairly easy to work with. What happens is all of a sudden we throw in these negatives, okay? And we need to be able to graph this equation. All right, there's several different ways to graph an equation. One is just to pick any numbers you want for x or y. Okay, you can pick them for x, you can pick them for y. Doesn't really matter. The easiest ones are the zeros. Okay, those are your easiest. Those are your intercepts. So once I pick an x, well, I put it in for the x. Okay, so I have to solve this, and you've got to keep that negative with the 2. Then I divide both sides by -2. So when x is 0, y is -2. Okay. Now I'm going to put my 0 in for my y. Well, remember, this becomes 0. So x minus 0 is just x. So x is 4. So that is your 0, -2 is the y-intercept for 0 is your x-intercept. So when you're asked on the test to list things in point form, don't just say x-intercept is 4, unless they tell you. But if they ask you in point form, you got to put it in point form. So you got to read the directions. Okay, so then I plot my 0, -2, which is here, my 4, 0, which is here. So I can draw that line. Now let's say we wanted to know the slope of that line. Well, think about your rise over run. You go up 2 to the right 4. Well, see, these are both positive movements. So this is 2 over 4, and we reduce it down to 1/2. Okay? And the line is going uphill, and that tells me that I know the slope has to be positive. So that's how you can check yourself. Okay? So you've graphed the line, you found the slope. We found it by doing intercepts. That's how you do your intercepts, by letting x be 0 and let y be 0, solving for the other value, and then plotting the points. Okay? So let's say they just gave me this equation here and asked me to find the slope. Well, I can find the slope by putting the equation in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Whatever this number is times the x is your slope. Whatever the b is, that's your y-intercept. So I have to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. Okay? These cancel. Now, I want to put it in this format here, mx plus b. So all I have to do is I'm going to put the -x first and the +4 second. Okay, that, remember from way back when I was talking about the positive negatives, that's a +4. But since I write it after the x, I now have to put the sign in for it. Now I divide everything by -2. Because when I divide both sides by -2, I'm actually distributing like we do with multiplication. So then y is -x over -2 plus 4 over -2. Okay? Simplify this. Well, this is positive x over 2. This becomes -2. But really, that's a 1 in front of the x. So we can really write this to that. Okay, I can pull the x out to the side. And so now I know my slope is 1/2 and my y-intercept is 0, -2, which is what we found when we graphed it like this. So you see there's several different ways to get this slope, get these intercepts. You just got to know what your instructions are on the test. Okay? So, you know, you got to practice it. You just have to practice it. You got to practice graphing. You got to practice finding slope. Okay? You know, the other way we can find our slope is through 2 points. So oftentimes I'll see students give me a slope as a point. Slope is not a point. Slope is a rate of change from one point to another. It has to be a fraction or a whole number. So if you're listing points as your slope, well, you're wrong. Okay, there's no way. So, you know, if I just say these are my 2 points, okay, on my graph, and I want to find the slope. Well, M is our symbol for slope. And remember, rise is your difference in your y's. That's what we do when we count. We're in theory subtracting is really what we're doing. So I take the difference in my y's over the difference in my x's. So I can say this is my second coordinate. This is my first coordinate. Okay, sorry about that. So this is my first coordinate, second coordinate. Doesn't really matter which one you call first, which one you call second, but you have to have, if this is my second coordinate, then X and Y both have to be my second. Okay, you can't flip-flop X's and Y's. So just take your time. Y2 minus Y1. And you see, I'm writing all this stuff down. Very rarely do I see my students do this to this detail, and then they miss them. So why not write it down if you want to get it right? Just to be sure. So I take 9 minus 5 over 3 minus 1. So that's 4 over 2. And that is just 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Remember, that's what the fraction bar means, divided by. Okay? Now, usually the problems arise when we have the negatives. Okay, so let's look at 3, negative 5. And let's look at negative 1 and 9. So I'm using the same digits, just different signs. So again, I'm still taking the difference in my y coordinates divided by the difference in my x coordinates. Again, this is still x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2. But you have to be careful because this minus sign has nothing to do with the signs of these numbers. So I take 9 minus negative 5 over negative 1 minus 3. So everything comes back to signs in math. I'm telling you, so many things come back to your signs in math. Well, this minus a negative in math means we make it plus a positive. Negative 1 minus 3, the signs are the same, so we add and keep the signs. So that gives me 14 over negative 4, which is 7 over negative 2, which means it's just negative 7/2. It doesn't matter where you put the negative sign. So the proper way of math is to put the negative sign in front of the fraction. Okay? So, that's some stuff that I see as mistakes on test. I see lots of mistakes with graphing. Lots of mistakes with plotting points, with intercepts, finding slope. So you can watch this, but then you got to go practice it. Okay, there's no substitute for practice. I've seen students who struggled mightily in my classes at the beginning, but they put the time in and they managed to do fine. Okay, they managed to make A's and B's because they dedicated themselves. They went home and worked. There's no easy way. It's just going to take time, and you have to dedicate yourself. So that'll be it for chapter 3, some of the highlights. So hopefully you stay with me in chapter 4 because that's another tough topic.